Hey everyone, welcome to the ET Soonicorns of India. And this roundtable is going to be about the Agritech space and how the space is ripe for disruption with India's agricultural industry and how internet and technology can shape the way farmers go about doing agriculture in India. So we have speakers here who can guide us and help us understand the space much better. We have Mark Kahn, managing partner of venture capital firm Omnivore, Rajesh Ranjan, founder Krishify. We have Nikhil Tripathi, co-founder Bijak, and Gaurav from AWS. I am Pranav, and I will be moderating the session. And I'd like to dive straight deep into the conversation about the Agritech space. And it is Agritech in India is still at its infancy, just 1% penetration as far as the market potential is concerned. It's 24 billion as per a report by Ernst & Young. And last year in September, the Union Minister Narendra Singh Tomar announced the initiative of Digital Agricultural Mission 2021 to 2025. So the initiative aims to sort of leverage a wide range of technology from AI, blockchain, and all the way to drone technology to improve the agriculture sector's overall performance. But given the complexity of India's agricultural setup, with most farmers categorized as small or marginal, having less than 5 acres of land, low economies of scale, limited access to technology, high marketing costs, low productivity, how challenging is this, and what are the pain points fundamentally, and how important is public-private partnership here for increased adoption of Agritech, and how closely do Agritech startups work with the government in this space? So I'd like Mark to answer this first, and then there's a question that I'd like to hear from everyone. But Mark, if you could start off, that'd be great.
Sure, I'll flip the question. How challenging is it to build a mobile network in a country that never really had landlines? Or how challenging is it to build fintech in a country where rural bank penetration was shit? Or how challenging is it to do last mile logistics delivery when no one has a stable address? The answer is about the same. And that is to say that everything that we're doing in the startup universe is hard. We're fixing the hardest problems that exist in India. And that's not just Agritech. That's everyone working logistics. That's everyone working fintech. That's everyone that's worked on digital identity and worked for 2 decades, on mobile connectivity. Everything is hard. The problem in agriculture is we've been telling ourselves this story for 7 decades that the only thing to talk about is poverty, And the worst, forgive me, are the journalists. Because they've been stuck on a Garibi Hatao kick for so long that it's impossible for them to understand that we're talking about 13 crore people here who you cannot generalize, in a single sentence. You know what? No one would say, 130 million people are all just like this, So we have 130 million farmers in India. Some of them are progressive and some aren't. Some are very poor, some are poor, some are not so poor. We have farmers that are doing advanced agriculture, If you look at our aquaculture sector, we're the leading shrimp exporter in the world. Our poultry farmers are at globally competitive levels. Would I say the same is true of our pulse farmers working unirrigated land in Marathwada? No, probably not. but it is impossible to generalize, right, effectively, 600 million people, right, 130 million farmers and their families, almost half of our population. And so what I would say is, the challenge for us isn't necessarily the structural issue of farm size. China's farm size is half of India's, and yet Agritech is reasonably well penetrated there. And I think the same thing is happening here. I think, in fact, our small farm size facilitates some Agritech models that wouldn't be required in other places. Farmer platforms are growing like crazy in India because they're bringing an organizational layer to this hyper-fragmented, decentralized system that's really required and where a lot of value can be created. I think the reality is, it's small farming and the smallholder system is what we have, right? The same way that in urban India we had low average spends, right? And these are fundamental, or that in logistics we had, weak infrastructure. And these are challenges, but they're challenges that with technology and with the right teams can be overcome.
Nikhil, would you like to add, what more, as to the fundamental challenges of this space? And, if small farm size is not a challenge, then what else really is the problem that you face every day and something that you wish was not there?
Yes, Pranav. So a very good question, and I totally agree with Mark what he mentioned, right? Although small or I would say medium-sized farms do add a lot of I would say challenges or a lot of variables in between, but it's not the sole cause of this problem. So in India, if you realize, like, for most of the people, right, who are doing farming as a business, for them it's a lifestyle business, and most of the time they have suffered from one thing or other. Although, like, digitalization is not something which is inescapable, but the rate at which these people are getting digitalized has been pretty slow in past. For a farmer to trust on a digital app for the first time to do a trade is something like a nightmare for him coming through, right? And this has to go deep down all the way from northeast to south to central India to Jammu and Kashmir, right? So to make it or to make any of the infra reach to all the remote locations in India and make it serve the purpose it was meant for, right? So what we have realized, like, market access is still something which is on paper, but many of our customers have been suffering, and we saw less than I would say less than 0.001% of the problems which exist. So we have to realize, like, although a portion of these people are poor or are below poverty line, but there have been people who have been a very traditional player and who have been doing successfully profitable businesses since decades. And they are the actual one who are acting as a backbone of this entire value chain. We need to leverage the existing infrastructure and push digitalization first on these people. Government as a body would only help you in building the infrastructure, but adoption is something which would come from the people and from the farmers and from the businesses end. So we need to act in coordination with other startups, other government bodies, and including the local FPOs or the local bodies which exist in the ecosystem. And then have to see this as a combined problem for the ecosystem and solve it.
Okay. Would you like to add more to that, Rajesh, on what Mark and Nikhil said?
Sure. So see, I agree, as Mark said, that being small and marginal land holding or being small and marginal farmers is not the only challenge or is not the real challenge actually. So see, a lot of innovation is happening around precision farming, around deep technology, better input, right? But the problem is adoption and how or distribution of these innovations that are happening, in silos. So in any industry, if you see, so digitalization is very necessary for distribution or adoption, fast adoption of these innovations, right? Because unless farmers are digital, distribution is very difficult, right? And for that matter, especially in our ecosystem, smartphone has really played that game, right? That's the real innovation because of smartphone and recently cheap internet access. Internet penetration has really happened, right? So that makes the adoption fast. But today, how many farmers are digital and how many of them are actually using digital platforms for their day-to-day business, which is agriculture, right? So once that happens, I think rest of the things can be sorted with lots of parallel innovations already running. But even if those innovations happen and farmers are not digital yet, or farmers are not using any digital platform, that will remain the biggest challenge.
The question is, the small farmlands also is a result of low income as well, right? So doesn't that, that's where isn't that a challenge? In the sense, like, the low income being associated with low adoption of technology. Has that never come across as a challenge for you, Rajesh?
So see, on one side we talk about fast penetration of smartphones in the rural. So there are some numbers like 900 plus internet users in India. Out of that, around 375 million are from rural, right? And when we say rural, so we can assume that 70% of them are directly or indirectly associated with agriculture, right? So 250 million plus stakeholders are today online using smartphones, using internet, right? So when you talk about can you solve the problem for all stakeholders, which is around 500 million to 600 million odd number, or specifically talking about the farmer population of 130 million, right? So can you solve everything at once for all of them? Maybe no, right? Because there are different types of farmers. So there are very lower income farmers who probably cannot afford a smartphone today or internet even today, right? Apart from that 130 million, there are 140 million to 150 million farm laborers as well, right? So they cannot probably, or majority of them probably cannot afford a smartphone, right? So probably, they in the cycle of innovation and this whole revolution, they might come at a slightly later stage, right? So today we are talking about at least those 50% farmer population who are already online, who are capable of using digital ecosystems, digital platforms to leverage better farming techniques, better tools adoption, more opportunities, right? So yeah, I mean that's how. So it's a cycle. Not everybody might leverage it at once, but it's a natural progression basically.
And Gaurav, is even for you from AWS's perspective, like, what are the challenges that you see in the space? Like, what are some of the pain points that you think that needs to be addressed?
So while I agree with Mark, Nikhil, and Rajesh on the challenges what they've spoken about, I would also like to add on some challenges. Like one of the main challenges, what in my view is a lack of knowledge about innovative methods. Farmers continue to rely on traditional labor-intensive methods, that too with limited access to modern machinery, logistics, and analytical data such as soil composition or climate patterns. So another one is like unpredictable climate. So we have to count for that. Crop yields are directly vulnerable to adverse weather, natural processes such as soil degradation or pest attacks. And another one is like, logistic and supply chain. There is lack of transparency on, pricing and lack of accountability, which has a direct effect on market price and customer trust, which is again becoming a challenge when it comes to finance to traditional method of farming. Having said that, we are seeing agritech startups, trying to solve many of these challenges. And after pandemic, COVID has also produced some tailwinds, with farmers depending on some of the startups for their services. But I believe we have to, now with the advent of the digital India story, what we are building here, right? Everyone from the farmer to distributor to the end consumer is increasingly becoming a connected, which is, I would say, thanks to the resilience and on-ground efforts by the Agritech founders.
Moving on from the challenges, the next part of the question which I asked earlier was, how important is, the public-private partnership here for adoption of Agritech, and how closely do Agritech startups work with the government now? Mark, can you start off with your viewpoint on this?
Yeah, my viewpoint is this government in particular, and many state governments have actually been quite progressive on areas regarding accelerating agritech. and that's been going on for many, many years now. NABARD has become a very positive catalyst in the Agritech ecosystem. You see this government with this sort of philosophical shift to doubling farmers' income, making Agritech startups more central. There have been a lot of good opportunities for Agritech startups to work, especially especially in a few states. And you can even see that now with the acceptance and acceleration in the drone space, where the government is being very, very proactive about making sure that drones can fly for agricultural monitoring and spraying. That said, I would always be a little bit reluctant to say that startups should spend too much time working on government-related activity. I think in general that they need to focus. It can be a great amount of support early in a startup's life, but it can also obscure the search for product market fit, and you can wind up, as for lack of a better word, chasing tenders for years and years and years and years without ever really knowing your customer better or proving product market fit. So I think this government is pushing on the right things. The fund of funds for startups that's being talked about for ag is an exciting step that was talked about in the last budget. The Agriculture Infrastructure Fund is fabulous. I mean, it's a really, really useful program to support the development of decentralized processing and post-harvest technologies. The drone stuff is amazing. Like, it's great to see that taking off. Sorry, dad joke. But yeah, I think in general, the government is doing the right things in this space, and startups need to work with them to the extent that it makes sense, but not spend all of their time working with them and kind of missing out on the focus on the more important customer, which is the farmer.
Rajesh, you want to weigh in?
I think it's also about reaching to a point, or I would say to an equilibrium where both public parties and private parties find common ground to build at or partner at, right? Currently, I believe that ground is kind of missing, right? And none of the parties have been able to reach there. And that's the reason, if Agritech founders have to work with the government, they have to keep running, on RFPs and the tender based methods, right? So having said that, public-private partnership, that's a great initiative, right? And the government is bullish about it because there are certain things, right? Because agriculture, as a sector is one of the most important sector from the government's perspective, right? Because of the population involved into it. So they already have taken a lot of initiatives. They work very closely for the farmers' benefit in general. And somewhere this entire Agritech ecosystem is also working with a similar kind of goal. So there are potential of these partnerships, but finding that common ground where these partnerships become very easy and more fluid in terms of execution, I think we are yet to reach there.
Nikhil, can you share your thoughts on where we can find the common ground that Rajesh is talking about?
Yeah, Pranav, so I think the current government has been very fair in terms of like giving an opportunity to new age startups and in terms of at least appreciating innovations and technology in almost all the sector. Agriculture being a laid back sector, I would say like anything or any of the policy would be last thought for this segment or would be last affecting this segment because the sector has been very slow moving. So like ENAM by government recently, they selected 5 Agritech startups of India, and luckily Bijak was part of it, where we are closely working with the nationalized agriculture market of India. NAFED as a body, right, which procures onions for government and then give supplies to various government bodies as well as private mandis. So NAFED has recently started, at least opened the gate for a couple of Agritech startup to ease out their onion procurement as well as liquidation part. So, but given the fact that the rate at which government bodies work is very slow, we as a company or as a founder have to actually decide whether the marginal utility of this project would be pretty enough in terms of the cost of time we are spending there, right? And most of the time it's startup which has to show the eagerness or has to reach out most of the places. Now, given the fact that the process is very tedious and it's not very open most of the time, startups or startup founders would very likely to miss upon the opportunities coming in. But in terms, if I compare like what it was there 3 or 4 years back compared to what it's there in 2022, things have changed a lot, and of course for positive. But given the fact, if we see the other side, right, why it's important, most of the infrastructure is already there, which has been developed by government. So if I talk about our business model, which kind of allows the supplier to discover a counterparty or a credible buyer, mandis are already there, and since mandi exists, we can find or we can figure out a credible buyer. So mandi is something which was developed by government, and it's a very critical infrastructure if we discuss the entire value chain. A couple of warehouses or storages are still owned by government. If a public-private partnership can happen over there, I think the entire value chain can get optimized by at least double-digit percentage, if not more.
Moving on, all of you spoke about digitization and how Rajesh spoke about how smartphone proliferated, but still, when talking about digitizing the agriculture industry in India, we must look at internet penetration, right, which still stands at about 50%. How do we make tech more accessible to farmers? And can Mark, can you weigh in there?
I don't know, like wait 3 years maybe. Okay. Like every year it slogs. Like cool. Like, yeah, I'm sorry, not everything's perfect. Internet penetration in rural India was 10% like 5 years ago. So now we're at 50. So wait a couple years. Like the cost curve has gone to a fraction of what it used to be. Handsets are getting cheaper. You'll start having used handsets at even cheaper price points, right? There are certain things that I worry about. This is not one of them. This is a time function.
And I mean, what more disruption can we see here, right? I mean, the geo effect or whatever that happened in 2016, and it's slowly sort of like, the 4G revolution or whatever is slowing down. Is there anything that, anything in the rural market that can probably, accelerate, from 50% to the next?
It was like 40% like before COVID. So like it's kind of going at 5% a year. I don't, are we gonna be able to do much about this? Probably not, honestly. Maybe there's a rural digitization effort the government wants to do, but this is going to come down to like Modi, Ambani, Adani. This is like way above our pay grade, man.
You want to weigh in there, Gaurav?
Yeah, sure. See, rural India is becoming digital savvy. As Mark said rightly, like with smartphone and internet usage increasing 30%, CAGR in the last 4 to 5 years, right? And if you talk about 2020, there were around 300 million internet users in rural India itself. And the Prime Minister Wi-Fi Access Network Interface Scheme is delivering broadband services to rural areas. Altogether creating a 2 million public Wi-Fi access points by the end of 2021. That was the goal, right? And there has been significant decline in the cost of technology access as well. For example, internet data cost now decreased to 64%. Over the last 3 years, and from 18.5 per GB to so INR 6.7 this year. So lower cost smartphone devices are improving access as well. Tech is actually being accessed by farmers today, which is the good news. And farmers are using YouTube, for example, to be able to see whether the advice they are receiving, it really makes sense to help them in solving or helping them take decision for their use cases, right? And some of the Agritech apps also, we have seen they have managed to penetrate this audience and bring them onto their apps, which indicates whether there is a value in what they are doing or not. Another avenue that can help make tech more accessible is to include local or regional languages support to reach out to a wider audience. And in some ways, it is like, our own evolution where we started using apps for, social media and entertainment heavily. but have now shifted to using apps for our productivity use cases. And I think I foresee an evolution happening, which will take time, but it will happen.
What about you, Rajesh? Do you see any other way to make tech more accessible?
Okay. See, largely it's a time function, but I think the extension of your question is, can Agritech become the catalyst behind increased or fast-paced penetration of internet? See, in a very optimistic way, I would say I would love to wait for the day when a feature phone user in rural India and mostly farmers buys a smartphone to access some of these AgTech services, right? And I would love to, by all means, I would love to see if that is happening, that starts happening with the aspiration of being on a platform, let's say like Krishify, right? Because in the past we have seen this. In order to use WhatsApp, people have bought smartphone who were earlier on, on a feature phone. So if some of these services become so great, right, so magnificent that really become, game changing for the farmers, for the rural Indians, then why not? I mean, these innovations can also play a role when smartphone really becomes that kind of aspiration, that it becomes a must-have thing. So even those who don't own a smartphone today, right, and if it becomes kind of necessary or mandatory for them to buy a new one.
Moving on, I have a specific question for Mark. You at Omnivore, you fund entrepreneurs building the future of agriculture and food systems. Right, your portfolio includes several agri-tech startups, from B2B to SaaS to Internet of Things. So when it comes to agriculture, there's no dearth of problems. So the canvas to disrupt and bring in efficiency is pretty vast. So what, according to you, would be the 2 or 3 big challenges that need to be tackled first in this space? Are there any innovation that you are particularly excited about in the near future?
Sure. Let me answer that separately. So we think there are sort of 4 big challenges that broadly need to be tackled in this space, which is what we describe as our theory of change. So we think the first challenge is radically increasing the profitability of farming, not the productivity, the profitability, the bottom line that goes to farmers. Is another way of saying doubling farmers' income or more so, right? We have to make farming a remunerative profession. The second is making farmers more economically resilient. So it's not just that at any given period they need to make more money. The radical swings in income that define being a farmer pushes people out of farming, right? It's like the world's most stressful job, right? One year, what if 1 year you made 3 lakhs and the next year you made 1 lakh and the year after that you made 5 lakhs and then you made 2 lakh and then you made 1 lakh. It's very hard to kind of have any stability in your life. And so addressing that issue of economic resilience is the second challenge that we see. And that's by, a variety of means. Third is this issue of agricultural sustainability. We have challenges with the amount of water that we're, using up in agriculture. We have challenges with respect to soil health. We have huge challenges in food waste and spoilage, and in the usage of natural resources in agriculture. And then finally, there's this whole issue of climate action, right? Indian agriculture is both an emitter, right? 20% of India's GHG footprint comes from ag, but it's also at the front lines of climate change, where, if climate change gets much worse in India, the ag sector is going to be the most badly hit of all parts of the economy. And so everything we're doing, we think these are like the 4 kind of big challenges that we have to face. If you ask me about what I'm excited about, look, I think it's a couple different big themes. I think I'm very excited about, we've made a lot of investments in the last few years in essentially this play around the digitization of Indian ag, right? So we call those platforms, we call those marketplaces, we call that fintech, right? But that's the space that not just in Omnivore, in Agritech more broadly, has really taken off. We continue to be very bullish in that. We think you're going to see larger and larger companies built in that space. And, Bijak and Krishify on this call are prime examples of that. I think a second theme that we're very excited about is deep tech. We're starting to see more and more serious innovation that's kind of coming, that's scientific in nature and coming up. Whether it's in satellites, hyperspectral satellites from Pixel, or low-cost robots from Tartan Sense, or the cheapest farm sensors in the world from Fussell, right? We're very bullish that there's going to be some pretty badass and even globally sold hardware. Our first exit came from Aruvaca. Our first big exit came from Aruvaca, and that was selling IoT devices made in Vijayawada all over the world. For the aquaculture sector. So I think there's a really strong possibility to build some pretty cool deep tech companies in India. And then the third thing that I am a advocate of, even though it's still very early days, is the agri-food life sciences sector in India, which is the most neglected space in our Agritech ecosystem. Just to give you an example, if you take any of my peer VCs in Israel, the US, Canada, or Europe, 50% of their portfolios are in life sciences, 5% of mine is. And that's because there's a dearth of life sciences activity in India, not just in agriculture and food, but in human health and in every other aspect. Like, it's just the one part of our ecosystem that's like truly weak. But I think that's starting to change. We're starting to see some interesting companies coming up that are rooted in synthetic biology and other disciplines of life sciences. We've made investments in Bioprime. We're about to announce our second life sciences investment, technically our third, in a couple of days. And that's part of this program that we're running right now called Omnivore, which is specifically to accelerate the agri-food life sciences space in India. And so while it's still early and I can't point to any glowing successes, it's an absolutely critical set of technologies and capabilities that we have to build. India is missing the boat on this globally. The Chinese are racing ahead. The Americans are already there, and we need to fix this stat. And so we want to be part of the solution to that.
I think, Mark, you said that being a farmer in India is the most stressful job in the world. I mean, I think I was reading an article somewhere that said that journalists, venture capitalists, founders, they are among the top most stressful jobs in the world. But anyway, as a venture capitalist, in 2021, it was a record year for startup funding and unicorns, right? So, but out of the 100+ unicorns that exist in India, I mean, none of them are from the Agritech sector. And how optimistic are you about unicorns emerging in this space? What's needed to enable this growth?
So first of all, I don't give a rat's ass about unicorns. I want to see IPOs in this space. I think that's coming. I think that you'll see the first IPOs of agri-tech startups in India probably in 2024 and 2025. I think companies like Dehat, Arya, Resha Mandi will IPO. I expect others will as well. I wouldn't be surprised if some are not the IPOs. With respect to what's a unicorn and what's not a unicorn, because right now you have a lot of what I call zombie unicorns, right? They're eating brains and they're falling apart, but they still technically have that valuation. I think we're building for the long term in the agri sector. I think if the 2021 boom had gone on for another 6 months, you would have seen 1 or 2 agri unicorns, and you didn't. But I think that you'll see them emerge in the next 6 to 12 months. But honestly, that's a preoccupation for good folks like you. I'm more obsessed with the idea that we'll have publicly traded agri-tech startups in India that are very successful, and I think those are coming in 2024 and 2025. Thank
you, Mark, for those inputs. And moving on to Rajesh, would like your inputs on at what you are doing at Krishify. You've talked about building an agri-verse with over 10 million plus farmers on your platform and over 6.5 million downloads, if I'm not wrong. So
registered farmers,
yeah, registered farmers. So what has been your strategy to make this technology more accessible? What you're building, can you share what your company is thinking or what your strategy is?
Okay, so see, on one side, that's like 101 of product building. So as you said, 50% of rural population has internet today, and we want them to be on Krishify, right? Because we believe that if they are on such a platform, their business, their livelihood, everything can become better. right? So now the strategy is to how to get these people, get that population, get that audience on a digital platform, right? So that's how we have built the product, right? So as I said, like product 101, you have to understand the audience, right? The only thing is, rather I would say the challenges is there are not many playbooks of the same kind. So every day we have to put in a lot of original thinking, right? Think from the very basic first principles. We have to take that kind of approach, right? Understand what this audience is like, what are their pain points, what do they actually like to have. It's not just what they need, right, but also what they can use. There are a bit of challenges, as we discussed in the first part of this discussion. So most of these people, they are new on internet, right? For many of them, for more than 60% of them, Krishify is probably third or fourth or fifth app that they extensively use, right? So if you see the way they use the internet, many of these farmers, like there is around 97 to 98% overlap with Facebook, but how many of them are actually creating content on Facebook, or they are creating content on YouTube, right? Mostly they are consumers. They don't do a lot of creation activities. On the other side, on Krishify, if you see, so roughly 8 to 10% of our users create content, right? And that's huge. So we have to we keep iterating the product, keep understanding what they are able to understand, what they are not able to understand. So it's not just Krishify learning, but I will say it's overall internet learning that is happening for these set of users, right? And that has been the base of our growth so far, and we are very optimistic about even faster growth in the coming months and years.
Also, there's also resistance from farmers to technology in some sense, right? So you use AI, ML to provide farmers with like personalized user experience, if I'm not wrong. So the government initiated AgriStack. That initiative faced a lot of resistance and backlash from farmers. And it was intended to be like a digital stack of agricultural data sets with land records and all at its core, right? But however, farmers have raised concerns about outdated and inaccurate record as well as data privacy. So when it comes to artificial intelligence and machine learning technology, they need good data set in order to function well, right? I mean, that's crucial because that's how the machine learning works, right? Data is really important. So what are your thoughts on this, and how do you go about building trust, especially in an industry that runs on minimal profit margins and old school technology? And the way of doing the business has not really changed in decades, right? So what are your thoughts there?
So see, both are actually two different things. One is getting data from different sources and different kind of data, ranging from more demographical data to a very, very personal or wealth related data. So getting from different channels, different sources, and kind of combining everything together on a neutral platform like digital stack that you were talking about, right? While and that's a good strategy, right? Because a lot of things in agriculture can be data driven, right? And no single source, I would say, including the government, has everything on a kind of digitized and all the data accessible to a single party, right? So collaboration between multiple parties and getting access to the entire value chain, right? So for example, let's say if one company has the data of post harvesting, their selling behavior, and the other company has the data of the entire sowing season, so their input purchasing behavior. So now both can be merged, and you have the entire value chain that can be leveraged by both the platforms as well as both the entire ecosystem. So they're sharing that kind of data. I mean, farmers do have friction. But in our case, the way it works today, right? At least today, I mean, in future it can change. We can collaborate with other partners, right, and bring in their data to be able to serve farmers in an even better way. But today, the way it works, it's like we have our own universe, right? So what farmers are doing, the kind of activities that they do, and we try to make good insights out of all those activities, right? and use it for their own benefit in terms of getting a very personalized experience on the platform. And when we do ML or NLP or AI to understand who this farmer is, right? So we are not just doing interest level analysis, right? We also have to understand their contemporary need, right? And as we say that, so Krishify has one thing which is also very different from the entire ecosystem, that we are interested in capturing the entire life cycle of a farmer, right? So in their life cycle, whatever activities they are doing, whatever needs they might have today, right, we have to address that within that limited time frame that they are spending with us, right? So that becomes very important, and that comes from our own ecosystem. So to keep it very simple, a farmer uses Krishify platform, better personalization or better personalized experience he or she is going to get.
Thanks. Thank you, Rajesh, for that. I'd like to know more about Bijak now, Nikhil. Bijak, at the end of the day, is a B2B marketplace for suppliers, buyers across India's agricultural value chain. So in recent years, the Indian agriculture sector has had many challenges, and that's also the main challenge has been the low yields. When compared to developing nations, India's farm yield is 30 to 50% lower, is what the data what we have here. So how can Agritech startups improve the overall value chain here?
Yeah, Pranav, so I'll be very specific to how Bijak is currently trying to solve this problem, right? So if you see a life cycle of a commodity, right, it's being grown by a farmer, then it would reach to any of the mandis, and eventually it's get consumed by a consumer like us, right? If it's not getting processed. Now, in most of the cases, the farmer would decide what commodity to be grown based on the market he's able to access, right? So a farmer growing onion would never want to grow a sugarcane because he doesn't have enough buyers for sugarcane. Let's say there is a village which grows wheat in a season. Now, one out of them farmer would not want to grow broccoli because he could not get enough buyers for broccoli. Right? So we have to understand, like in India, or all of the numbers cannot be compared to global numbers because specifically in agri space, the scenario keeps changing. A lot of things are not even under control of humans, right? It's weather driven or it's temperature driven. Now, at Bijak, we are just trying to create a open, democratized marketplace for all the buyers and sellers of agriculture commodities. So in layman terms, we help a seller to discover buyer and a buyer to discover seller. And that's what we envision about, right? And we very closely work with many of the other Agritech startups, government bodies, in terms of helping them to fulfill their procurements or maybe at times helping them to liquidate the produce. So we are trying to optimize the value chain just by ensuring that the food wastage gets reduced. A farmer is able to fetch better prices for his commodity so that he can actually choose the crop he wants to grow rather than being, rather than this decision being driven by what the other community members are growing. And in last slide, it's a community driven thing. So you have to understand that most of the agriculture commodities get shipped at a bulk level, which means you need to have a critical mass of a commodity to ship it from one place to other, right? I just cannot send 10 kg of rice from 10 kgs of wheat from MP to Bangalore all the way, right? The cost of logistics would be very high compared to when it gets shipped at a truck level, right? In a couple of trades, the cost of logistics itself is as high as 50 to 60% of the realized produce cost. So we have to understand, like, although the low yield is something which we need to take care of, but it's something which would require a scientific approach. You need to change the seeds you are using. You need to change the maybe the manures or the fertilizers you are using, and still you won't be able to get the desired outcome because it's something which is beyond the human control, and at times it would be dependent on weather or the temperature. But post-produce is something which most of the startups or the platforms are trying to optimize, is something which is under our control, and it's a business call. So at Bijak, we are trying to bring in technology and kind of make most of the things objective rather than subjective. So trying to replace the human expertise with help of technologies and all what you mentioned, right? So I started my career as a data analyst, so I understand the value a data can bring, and at the same time we have to ensure that not all of the data is useful. At times, if you cannot make sense out of data, is as good as garbage for you, right? So to have a data which would make sense, and then kind of get this data from various bodies, to work very closely with other startups who are in similar space or trying to optimize the space, and then come up with a full-fledged solution post produces something which we are currently trying upon. So I'm not sure if this would help in terms of like increasing yield. Of course, now since a farmer can choose a commodity he wants to actually grow, or a commodity which would actually fetch a better price for the farmer, so of course it's going to make a slight difference. But what we count as our impact is most probably whether we are able to give any of the farmer or farmer bodies or FPO a market for the produce they have already grown, and then they want to liquidate. Given the nature of commodity, right, it's very perishable. It would be like for sold for nothing if it gets delayed just by 2 or 3 days post produce.
Understood. And another question that I have for you is that there are many. There's no dearth of agritech startups here, right? There are close to 1,500 agritech startups in India as of June this year. This is data according to Traction. So, I mean, such a large number of players in the market. How do you look at making a meaningful impact?
Yeah, Pranav. So honestly speaking, the space is so huge, right? If we actually see the Bijak's contribution to this entire value chain in absolute term, it would come in decimals, right? Decimals you would not even be able to read, because it would have many zeros before the number. But given the fact that in India, like the agriculture market is close to $370 billion market, and contributes almost 19% to GDP, increase from 17%. We at Bijak, we are just trying to create a platform which would exist for decades and which would solve a very basic problem, the problem of market access or market linkage, right? So for now, a farmer growing potato in Agra may not be able to sell it to Bangalore, or even if he's having a buyer in Bangalore, he may not know that there is a buyer in Khammam who needs a truckload of potato. To solve this very basic problem, and given the fact that it's not a FMCG good which can wait for a month or week before getting sold, right? Once it's out of it, you need to sell it before 2-3 days. Once it's out of cold storage, it needs to be dispatched within 24 hours. Now, time is something which plays a very important role. Of course, given the fact that logistics and temperature and other challenges are there. We don't see our impact in absolute terms. I mean, if we talk about entire market, I'm not sure whether we'll able to capture even one of the geography of any of the commodity, because a few minutes back you were talking about like no unicorn exists in Agritech space, right? In Agritech, like each of the commodities, as Mark mentioned a couple of days back, each of the commodities have a potential to create unicorn in a specific commodity. It's just that the movement has very recently started in this space. The adoption on farmer side has increased, and it's an exponential growth, right? The digital adoption among people. We have to wait. We have to give some time to the space, to the sector, for people to adjust, right? We are trying to change the entire human behavior which has existed for centuries, right? It's not a new business we are trying to change. So if I tell a couple of cases, we have helped the farmer to fetch 7 rupees instead of 2 rupees per kg for his banana, which were 2 truckloads of banana. You have to understand, for a farmer, it's just twice a year he gets an opportunity to earn bread for his family. If you can change the price at that point, if you can help in even fetching half a rupees per kg extra, right? He's going to use your product for lifetime, right? They are very loyal, and for them, it's not a luxury they are buying out of it. It's a necessity for them. So we see our impact as the volume which is being traded through the platform right now. It's 100 trucks per kg, 100 trucks per day, sorry. And it's translates close to 2,000 tons. But moving forward, we see Bijak as an umbrella for all the post-produce trade, where most of the other players would be using it to discover counterparties. And as of now, I think it's in itself, it's a very big problem to solve.
Thank you. I'd like to move on to Gaurav and understand from the AWS's perspective. So there are nearly 100 agri-tech startups that raised close to $1.3 billion across 139 deals between Jan 2020 and June 2022. So, and there is no unicorn yet in the agritech space, like we discussed earlier, but there is tremendous interest from your experience in working closely with these startups. What are some of the trends in tech advancements and tech solutions adoption in this space that is driving the boom of interest and powering this disruption in this whole agri-tech industry?
Right. So just like every other sector, so agriculture also has been disrupted by tech companies in the last few years, and in an attempt to transform it with the introduction of various technologies and innovation, right? Logically, agritech is also a relatively young space, so it may not be correct to compare it to the other tech-based unicorns, operating in spaces which are very few decades ahead already. So though we are confident that agritech will see a few unicorns, emerge in the year to come. As far as trends are concerned, we are seeing a lot of, artificial intelligence being used in supporting farmers in overcoming a range of challenges and helping farmers with enhanced decision making. Like a smallholder farming in India may benefit significantly from having access to AI models, that may boost farm revenue, optimize input cost, and de-risk agriculture through quick data intervention. Some of our customers use data science, and AI to promote sustainable farming practices through precise decisioning, or to reducing farming cost and, of course, increasing yields. Another area is the space of computer vision. By placing, sensors in the field and cameras on the farms or in a factory for supply chain or warehouse, we can collect information, related to climate, soil quality, humidity, product quality, or even livestock movement as well. We can analyze it, support farmers as they are going about their work, right? So one of our customers offer personalized crop advisory to farmers by generating a crop calendar using big data and analytics, taking more than 30 parameters into the account. Now, a farmer can get advice on the exact amount of fertilizers and pesticides, along with spray date, enabling them to save cost, which is associated to the crop inputs and outputs, right? I'll say that Krishify, who's in our panel, they leverages our tech solutions to provide a more personalized experience to their users as they aim to build a better network for their farmers. Finally, we are also noticing, drone startups that have generated a detailed map of the farm, that characterize your, specific agronomic issues, including nutrient deficiencies, your pest and weed infection. In short, there are lots of interesting tech advancements and innovation in this space.
Thank you for that, Gaurav. These are the questions I had for all of you. This is a super insightful conversation, and thank you so much. Everyone made in the good points. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Nikhil. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Gaurav. Thanks, Rajesh, for these inputs.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pranav. Thanks, everyone.